Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here in an incredible space. If you're listening to the audio, make sure you tune into the video this time. I'm here with Ash Bird, visual artist and curator here in Launceston, Tasmania, in your wonderful sitting room. Is it a sitting room?
It's a sitting room, yeah.
Yeah. Ash, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, no, it's look, this is a conversation that I've wanted to have for a very long time. I first encountered your art at the university, in the gallery space, and it was always in the corner. Every time I went in, we'd go in for a crit or something, and you had some work in the corner. And I never ever we'd met a few times, but never really had a proper conversation.
Yeah.
So I see this as a chance to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Ask you about where it all began,
Yeah.
where it all is today, and where it's all going in the future. And just spending the last hour or so with you, just learning how much we actually have in common. We're a similar generation. We're surrounded by objects here that really resonate with me. So yeah, it takes me back.
Yeah.
Can you take us back to where it all began for you as an artist?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Melbourne in the early '70s, and I've been lucky to be in an environment where art was important. My great grandmother was kind of like she sat in the whole Heidelberg School of artists, where female artists weren't really kind of given that as much credit as male artists of that generation. But then my father was a draftsman and engineer, really amazing. His drawings that were schematics of for products that he was looking after, working for General Electric, were beautiful.
Yeah.
Little diodes and resistors and everything, and he drew all those things by hand. So creativity, I suppose, has been something that actually was never diminished in my life. So that when I was a kid and I wasn't a good student in English and mathematics and all those other things, that when I actually found that my area of interest and not so much talent, but the creativity was in things like photography was a big thing for me in high school. And I was the only male kid in a sewing class, which then ended up becoming kind of like a way that I moved through creativity outside of school.
Okay.
So when I applied to the course of black and white photography at RMIT. That was the Uber course for black and white wet photography. And I didn't get that course, and then I was just lolling around my father's house in Belgrave, and he just said, "Look, you're going to get out and work and make some money instead of just kind of like wasting time here."
Yeah.
So he sent me out to his friend who had a business making industrial sewing, potentially pretty much anything that was marquees, tents, covers for utes, those kinds of things. That's what they were making. So I fell into doing industrial sewing machining. And so from there, I hated being in a factory environment. And at the time I was living with a model, and she did modelling for a thing in Melbourne called Gown of the Year. So it was a dressmaking competition. So this lady, she said, my friend said, "Oh, this designer is looking for a sewing machinist." And I said, "No way. I'm using things that have the same names as cars. These sewing machines, they were made by Mitsubishi and Toyota, and they were big, clunky kind of things that had stitches, where I was so scared I was going to sew over my hands. They were so scary, these things. But I got really quite proficient at using them. So, but this lady was fantastic. She said she still wanted to meet me, and she said that she would sponsor me to go back to school and learn how to do that domestic style of sewing. So I went back to school and through TAFE courses and learned how to do dressmaking, tailoring, those kinds of things. And then I worked doing that for many years. Okay. So I don't know, I think from that, I've always had a love of textile, and a love of fabric, and a love of, I don't know, the memory that's ingrained in clothing and those kinds of things. So yeah.
Wow. My goodness, there's so much to work with right there. I mean, you take me right back. Like, so I, you know, my story, as many regular listeners know, is yeah, I didn't go to art school. I went into engineering instead. But the translation was as a draftsman. So I didn't. When I got to the drafting shop, actually, there were suddenly all these computers there in the early 90s, and it wasn't just as your grandfather did. So, but what I'm getting from your description of your grandparents' work was visual communication. But then how, so you, through photography, you were communicating visually, but then found your way into working with fabrics.
Yes.
But in working with fabrics, are you, I mean, as a visual artist, how does that translate into working with fabrics?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question because for me, there's lots of things about, like I get excited by types of fabrics.
Yeah.
And one of the fabrics that I'm most excited by, that I even wrote a paper in my undergrad about, is gingham, which is that kind of like, very country style checkered fabric, because it had, cliche to say it had a checkered history, but it had this really interesting history that allowed it to be more than just a fabric.
Yeah.
And for it to be loaded as this kind of country kind of home style kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And how the very, very simple mode of that actually being not just, you've got your warp and weft threads of any fabric, and this is just a regular woven fabric, but when you actually, you say you take white, black, white, black, white, black, and you do the same thing with the other threads, you get gingham. That's what you get.
Yes.
Whereas if you want to talk about a fabric pattern like houndstooth, you need to have a certain level of putting the shuttle through and over and under and over and under different ways to get houndstooth as a pattern. So patterns and those things are things that I'm really interested in, because the way that they're then utilised, like houndstooth has been utilised as a pattern of luxury by David Jones, the department store, and by Chanel. So I like how fabrics travel through time and they actually have different levels of value. Because the thing about gingham that I learned when I was a dressmaker was that before using calicos and those kinds of fabrics, gingham was a cheap fabric that was used for dressmaking, because it's got a certain check size, so you can actually use that when you're making something and saying, okay, this is 3 checks, it's 3 inches, or it's 2/4 of an inch or whatever, and you've got all these 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, an inch, 2 inches, and you could use those fabrics to then as a way to measure without having a measuring tape. Yeah. So a lot of there were some early dresses that were made in France they were gingham dresses, but they weren't. They were called toiles. They were kind of like almost like a mock-up for a dress. And then they became dresses.
Yeah.
Because the fabric was nice. So the evolution of what fabric is and can be in contemporary culture is something that will always interest me.
Yes.
And I'm the guy who will try to, whether it's inappropriate or not, will go up to somebody and say, oh my God, that's fantastic what you're wearing. And I might even just want to do a little bit of a rub, between my fingers of the fabric. The other day I saw a man, and in the street, I didn't know him, and I had to tell him. He had this shirt, and it was this red and black shirt. It's the fabric's called seersucker, and it's got like a bit of a ripple through it. And this was just amazing. And I had to stop. Brisbane Street Mall. Excuse me, sir, your shirt is amazing. And he was so happy to hear that. And I was just saying, where did you get it? And he got it in New South Wales. And I said, can I, I'll have a bit of a go at the fabric. So those things are important to me.
And what I really get from you, Ash, is that you, by understanding the process of making the fabric, how and tracing the origins of why those certain weaves.
Absolutely.
How and why for me, I really like functional wear. Like I have two sort of key brands that are, but they say something about me.
Yes.
Because of how those basically what those fabrics say about who I am.
Yeah, and it's not. So for me, I mean, even what I'm wearing. So this shirt is a stylish shirt that I buy from one shop.
Yeah.
And I buy a lot of them because I've found the cut, the quality, the fabric, and they're not that expensive. But I just have a lot of those shirts, different colours. This is flannelette, but I've got the same shirt in cotton and in linen.
Yes.
So that I can actually go through the seasons and I can still wear what I feel most comfortable in. So I have developed my own kind of uniform. It's almost like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. He reveals his cupboard has got all of the same outfits. Because he said Einstein was the same he had the same idea. He didn't want to think about what he wore, so he wore the same thing.
I didn't want to think about it. Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, Van Neistat. I don't know if he's
Yes.
on YouTube. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of Van's, but a lot of what he does is very much informed with his work with, or having worked with Tom Sachs and the idea of the artist's uniform. I mean, one thing that it's like I could spot you the other end of Brisbane Street Mall. Ash, I could go to Hobart and be in a street I've never been down. If you're at the other end of that street, I can see it. I mean, your sartorial excellence would be a word,
thank you,
phrase
Tim.
I would use.
Yeah.
You have your own style, but it's so well considered.
Yeah, it is. Because I'm that person that kind of like that. The night before, I'm thinking about what I'm going to wear the next day.
Okay.
So that when I get up in the morning, I just pick it all out. It's like Elle in Clueless. Have you ever seen that film where she kind of like she has this computer system that kind of like and all of her dresses and everything, and then she selects that beautiful plaid, two-piece number that's all yellow plaid. So I'm always thinking about those kinds of things and thinking about combinations of clothes. So it is something that is those things are very important to me.
Yes.
And I did have my upbringing as well was very much female orientated.
Okay.
Other than my father, because it was two grandmothers and grandfather was around when I was young, but not all the way through. A sister and an aunt. My mother was a big part of that, and I tended to have lots of female friends when I was growing up. So that sense of kind of like looking great every day is something that was really important to me, even down to the point of kind of like going through the colognes in the morning. If I walk out the door and I don't actually have a scent on, and all of a sudden I realise that I haven't, I'll drive back home to make sure I put it on because for me that's like going to work not wearing pants.
Yes.
So I don't think you wanted to hear that on this podcast, but that's...
Well, I was going to say, maybe this is the new podcast. Tim Talks Fashion. But Ash, but I think so many artists this would resonate with so many artists because it's about a distinctiveness about yourself. Laura Purcell.
Amazing.
How Laura's sense of fashion, her history, family history of making and sewing, particularly, how that then feeds into her artist practice. Now, I'm going to do this huge segue. It's going to seem huge, but it goes back to what we were talking about when I first walked in the door this morning, which is Frankentoys. So how your practice, how that occupational practice that you had how that translates into art. And you were telling me about making Frankentoys. And so the needlework, the sewing, the repurposing, the making, how you understand fabrics and how to work with them this ability to bring two seemingly different objects together. But then the why is so important. So is that an appropriate thing to talk about now?
Most certainly it is. Yeah, most
Tell
certainly.
me about that. I'm fascinated by it.
Well, I think the thing is that a lot of my practice is about kind of looking into popular culture.
Yeah.
And bringing popular culture and nostalgia to the surface and being able to investigate and interrogate it. And one of those interrogations was looking at soft toys, looking at toys that were really quite famous and iconic, whether it was Garfield or whether it was toys associated with Sesame Street, those kinds of things. And out of that, myself and another artist, we'd decided that for some of the work we were doing that was festival-based, that we wanted to do this thing where we wanted to look at something that is a big textile waste, which is to stuff toys. Because when you think about it, it feels like a no-brainer that when a child gets given a stuffed toy, a soft toy, and they get to an age where they don't want it anymore, and they get given another toy, and then they get to another age and they don't want that anymore, these things kind of get thrown away by their parents, or they get sent to an op shop. And what we discovered was that the amount of waste, or this is something that I read about first, the amount of waste that is actually not just fast fashion, but is textile waste to do with stuffed toys is just as bad, and it's just as actually toxic because they're all kind of polyesters and plasticky kind of fabrics, and they're all very highly coloured and dyed, and the leaching of that kind of like into is just horrendous. And there's more. We realised there was more toys that an op shop could ever handle. So we did one of these projects at Junction Arts Festival a long time ago, and then we've done the same thing for mainland festivals for the past couple of years, where we've kind of refined what we do. It used to be that we would just have all of these toys, we would just let people at it, and then they would pull it all apart, and then they would kind of like put their own parts together again. Whereas we've got it to a point now where we kind of curate, the disembodiment of these objects. So we'll get in there first before the festival starts, and we'll cut off arms and legs and heads. So you've got all these pieces.
Yes.
And then they choose what they want to put something together. And then what they do is they take those pieces and they have to sew them together.
Yeah.
The process of them actually taking a wool on big needles and sewing these together, that's the whole Frankentoy thing, because it's like they all look like big stitches.
Yes.
And they put these things back together again, or not together again, but they put their own combinations of things together. And we were just absolutely in awe of the creativity that was actually happening. Yeah. When you give a child of about, between 5 and 10 years old, kind of like all of these things, and they kind of go, okay, they don't realise that a head needs to go in a head hole, or all of a sudden you'll find that it'll be a teddy bear and it'll actually have heads for arms.
Yes.
And it won't have a head and a head hole at all. And just amazing. I mean, for me, the greatest thing for me sometimes isn't making art. It's just about watching art happen.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not, and you don't get that all the time. If you're not in somebody else's studio, you're not seeing art making. You're seeing the result of it all the time. You're not seeing the process. When you see those kids making those things, was one of my favourite things to do. Was that my grandfather did actually have one thing to say to me before he died, and it was if you feel like you're taking $20 out of the till for the job you're doing, you feel like you're stealing, not being paid, then that's a great place to be. That's a great place to work. And that's what I felt like that. I felt like I'm being paid for this.
Yes.
And it's such a privilege to do those kinds of things. And I've seen so many kids do so many wonderful things. And then what we get at the end is that we'll have 300-400 toys that will have gone back out into the world from stuff that would have gone into landfill. And I'm only kind of hoping that the idea of them actually making their own toy imbues that toy with something more than just being given a toy. They make that toy, they make it in a way that it'll be nothing like any other toy that's out there, and then they take it home and they love it forever or they love it for a whole lot longer. And because when you get to the end of that festival, all you've really got on the floor is lots of little pieces of stuffing.
Yes.
That you can kind of like scoop up into one bag and throw away.
Yeah.
Everything else is gone.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that I try to remember when I think that I'm getting too highbrow or high in my own supply about art. Think about what creativity as a function can do.
Yeah.
I suppose as well as that, when I was teaching at the UTAS, my philosophy was that every time it was the first week of the first year of something, that the potential of the people that came into that class was something that excited me, to the max, because each one of them has the potential to create something that only they can create in a visual language that we know is out there, but everyone individually, when you put them in the same scenario, is going to make their art.
Yes.
It's not derivative of anything else. It's theirs, which makes it a visual language that is better than anything else.
Yeah.
And once you get that under your skin, you just feel like you're addicted to something really, really quite good.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I suppose, yeah, for myself, that's why I love to teach, is not just the passing on knowledge. It's actually watching, being surprised and delighted by what students then feed back to us. But I love this idea how those Frankentoys, they will then carry their own stories with them as well. Yeah,
because one of the things that I got interested in starting my PhD was about the biography of toys and how toys were important. And the big part of the research that I was doing was about how toys were played with and how how pieces that were missing or pieces that were broken or things that actually had kind of like the marks from being thrown down the driveway or whatever made that toy, even if it was a mass-produced toy, important to that person.
Yeah.
So that there was an Irish photographer who wrote this book called Much Loved. And it came from this idea that his son had this Peter Rabbit toy that he loved and loved and loved and loved and loved until it was just almost threadbare and falling apart.
Yeah.
So he put the shout out to people who had toys like that, and he found an absolute, this subculture of people that had these toys that some of them were just absolutely, they were just a head and strands of kind of fabric, or things that had been repaired and repaired and repaired. These teddy bears, mainly teddy bears, and then there's stories about them. There's a biography that is attached to that toy, and we know from the sentience that popular culture gives toys, like Toy Story. So the Toy Story movies became embedded in my PhD for so many different reasons. Is that those toys that were threadbare and falling apart, they had true, honest stories about the reason why they were important, because they were held onto by that person right into adulthood.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I love that word held. It's to be held, to be loved, to be cared for, to the point, to so much you just can't let it go.
Well, the amazing amount, the amazing amount of comfort that you get from something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that. I mean, I had a teddy bear. My sister had a teddy bear. People just have these things.
Yeah.
My partner's got a teddy bear that has kind of like these amazing little shorts that are made out of tartan, because I think they were all in the Bay City Rollers. But so they have all of these little kind of memories that kind of come back, and that's important to me as well. That I can get that waft of the plastic of an old toy.
Yes.
And I can kind of somehow find my way back to somewhere that is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to make models, and so it's when you I was going to say break them out, but I used to cut them out of the frames, and that smell that you get, the smell of the glue. Let's go. I mean, so you mentioned your PhD and told us about the subject of it. So that was around that time was when I was first encountering your artwork. We didn't really converse that much back then, but so. The work that I would see in the corner of the gallery, and it would move around as well, I think, a little bit. Maybe you'd come in and I don't know what you were doing with it, but perhaps you do remember. But how, so your PhD, how did that translate into the making of things? And perhaps you could share with us what those things are.
Well, it started off specifically looking at toys that had kind of a lot of popular culture kind of references, and the first ones were Star Wars figurines.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be able to fit into like our generation is the same. I wanted to fit into an idea about what generations kind of like felt about these things, what was common, as I kind of moved around to different things. So while I was working on my PhD, I was investigating things like Star Wars figurines. There was a big section where I had this big deep dive, which could have sometimes gone. I think it could have gone in the direction of my PhD at the end, but it didn't. Where I was actually making castings and making plastic biscuits.
Yeah.
So Arnott's family assorted biscuits, to be able to kind of like define some sort of language that everyone kind of understood. And then it was, then I moved into toys like Tupperware toys, because even though their toys are made by lots of toy companies, and Tupperware didn't make that many toys, there's a couple of iconic toys that Tupperware made, and they've got the accolade of being the one toy that is most common around the world.
Really? I didn't even realise they made toys.
Yeah, so so in the 1950s they decided, well, 1950s or 60s, they decided in their campaign to get the hearts and minds of the housewife, that they would make a few toys for toddlers.
Yeah.
One of the most important ones was called the Shapo toy, which is kind of like this red kind of thing, and it's got, you put all the yellow pieces in it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and that was continually made from when they first made them until right now.
Yeah.
So I was always trying to look for things that people understood. Mm-hmm. They knew them for some reason. But what I then ended up doing, there's an example here. What I then ended up doing was having stuff like this, where these are plastic castings that were then made from very, very mass-produced German toys that got put together. They were a precursor to Lego.
Yeah.
So what I did, these were toys that were part of a set of blocks that would have been my grandparents. So, and I hit on this thing where I'm going, okay, it doesn't need to be something that is known by my generation. It needs to be something that is quintessentially toy-like.
Yes.
So then what I did was, I kind of like in my PhD, I talk about this idea of toyness. What actually makes a toy a toy? But then to be able to then say that I want to have this to be something that actually can be seen as being a toy, without giving it any demographic. So it's like, okay, they're little, they're wood blocks, they can fit together. There's a Lego thing happening there. There's a wooden block thing happening there. There's a play thing happening there. I'd say that they're toys.
Yes.
So then I actually had a language.
Yep.
To be able to play with. So then these blocks in particular, so there was a box of blocks. So I made a casting of every single piece in that box, and they were my codifying pieces. And then I took all of the molds for all of those, and I just went absolutely nuts. Like, I cast hundreds of these pieces, different pieces. So I used lots of white resin, and then I coloured them in different ways to be able to then do things.
Yeah.
So then the PhD work was a whole bunch of these little setups and they were all made out of clear resin. But at the points where they touched the black perspex, I cut a hole. The bottom of this, the bottom of that, the bottom of that, the wheel joints there. So then underneath it, I could light it.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you'd actually have everything that was there would just be lit. Yeah. So that there was about 30 of these probably the same size of that coffee table, these plinths that were this high, different heights.
Yes.
All the way around, that was in the Plimsoll Gallery in Hobart.
Yep.
And there was 30 of these different kind of setups of different blocks. And then when you encountered them, there was a sensor that was at about knee level. So that it's all dark. You walk in and all of a sudden one lights up. And then as you walk away, that dims down and then another one lights up. So that people could hopefully feel this nostalgic kind of thing, this very, very gentle, dark space where something kind of like, and they see these jelly-like kind of things that are there. And because they're wood and the silicon gets every detail of the timber, you can actually see that they're plastic, but they've been translated from wood to plastic.
I can see that, particularly in the roof here of this house. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah.
The PhD it all evolves. It's like my espalier fruit tree out there. It's like you're annoying the crap out of it to get the fruit where you want it to be.
Yeah.
And that's what the PhD was for me. It was pruning it the way I wanted to. So now my practice is about going back to those things that I pruned off and seeing whether they can also bear fruit. Because I've got all these things that are PhD stuff, but I'm actually now interested in in going to the next place.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I was going to ask where does that lead you now?
Well, I mean, I've got a commission work that I'm doing for friends, which is just a bit of a mash-up kind of thing, which is it's the Ninja Turtles, the old Ninja Turtles figurines, but I've got their bodies, the bodies of Master of the Universe, kind of like jacked.
Oh yeah.
And I'm using clear resin that I've been able to put into a pressure pot, so I get beautiful, very, very crystal clear. I didn't get that with my PhD work.
No.
But there's a little bit of learning new ways of making as well. I mean, I discovered 3D printing during my PhD and those kinds of things. So I'm having a bit more fun with those things, but I'm not really giving myself too much pressure.
No.
So sometimes I'm sitting in front of the TV in there, and like last night I'm just sitting in there and I'm actually doing some hand stitching.
Yeah.
I'm doing embroidery again for the first time in a long time.
Oh really? Yeah.
Yes, some embroidery that'll be popular culture based embroidery. So I've got kind of patterns in there for me to do some embroidery, cross stitch, long stitch, that will be based on Pac-Man, or I've always been interested in being able to put a contemporary spin on video games and those kinds of things, because those, especially with embroidery, because when you're dealing with cross stitch, you're dealing with pixels or squares, and then that kind of translates really well into then saying, okay, what can I do with these things? I mean, there was Galaga, and you've got the little ship that kills off all the aliens. Okay. I made an embroidery where I had the little Galaga ship and all the other ships kind of looking for a car park.
Yep.
So taking one thing and then mashing it up with the other thing.
Yeah.
I do the Frankentoy kind of thing is something that almost is embedded in other parts of my practice, where I like to kind of do one thing and then the other. So at the moment, all of my artwork is actually looking at board games.
Okay.
And subversions of board games and what they really mean. Like, the work that I'm working on at the moment is based on the game Hungry Hippos.
Yes. Yeah.
Where I wanted to be able to look at, so many people are still hungry in the world, and it's like it sounds peace, love, and brown rice, but the hungry hippo can only kind of get so far. So what I've done is I've actually cast these hippos and made them so that they're next to this long. They're reaching further.
Oh, they're greedy.
They're reaching further, and it's that capitalist kind of reaching further because they can.
Yeah. Okay.
And Monopoly, where I've done this kind of thing where I've taken the Monopoly houses and I've made a mould that will get me about 100 little houses each time I put resin into them. And I want to have a situation where I put all these houses all over something as a disease.
Yeah, right.
Because housing is such an issue. And Monopoly kind of is this kind of game of capitalism. So I'm interested in those kinds of things.
Yeah. So there is a politics to your work, and for me, and how many toys actually are they fuel consumerism would be the most obvious thing, but they also are objects that are informed by and inform our relationships with capitalism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, like what we were saying, before we started, the whole George Lucas, idea of no one was interested in the toys and all of the merchandising for Star Wars, and he made a lot of money out of that and that was the first time that happened. No one from a capitalist ideology is ever going to forget how much money they can make out of toys because of that.
Yeah.
And that was partially what I was doing with the Star Wars figurines as well. Is I was I made a whole lot of those toys where I made them in clear resin, and when I had them on display, I had them high, and I had them in this kind of godlike kind of thing, because the juggernaut of Star Wars, and I'm a card carrying Star Wars fan, has gotten really crazy over the past couple of years, where it's like, well, if they're not making something else that is going to just feed the appetite of people that are into this franchise, then we're going to stop making money. When recently I saw one of these amazing, somebody's has put together the original version of Star Wars before they started screwing around with it, even in the early days, where the crawl just came up and it didn't have a title or anything. It just was the crawl. There was no episode 4. There was no New Hope. It was just the crawl. That capitalism can take something that's popular and can really wring it out.
Yes, it does.
And that's one of the things that I sometimes it sometimes worries me, or it can fuel my work. I mean, the Glover Prize work that never sold, so it's here in the house, was one where I thought I'd only do something for a sculpture, for a painting prize like that, if I could do something that I felt was important, or could speak to something. And then at the same time as some very, very harsh environmentalist kind of things happening in parts of northern Tasmania, was this whole stupid thing about barbecue shapes.
Right.
That barbecue shapes were they'd changed the recipe or changed the way they were being made. The flavour was in the biscuit rather than being sprinkled over the top. I don't know what it was, but there was this whole kind of furor about. And I thought, what the hell are we worried? I mean, I like stuff like that, but why the hell are we we spending all of our time worried about the way that a snack cracker costs, or how it tastes? And then they brought back. Then they decided, oh my God, but there's a way we can make money out of this. So then Arnott's then brought back all of their flavours, and then they were original.
Yeah.
The original barbecue shape, the original pizza shape, or whatever. And I was already doing castings of biscuits at the time. So then I made this work that were drawings of Glover's trees from one of his famous works, and then I was obliterating them with perfectly cast little barbecue shapes, to go and say, what if we lost? What if we lost? And Glover, he saw the landscape a certain way, and there's some beauty in his pictures and that stuff. But now what do we care about? We care about the fact that a barbecue shape tastes different to the way it used to. Mm-hmm. So I just mashed those things together, hoping that it would resonate, and I think it kind of did. But so those things are always things that that concern me. And I think that art has a responsibility to be able to perhaps make somebody go, it might be one person, it might be 10 people.
Oh,
but
it does.
it might be, okay, I get where you're coming from, and maybe I'll change, but perhaps not.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, if there's one thing so far that I'm really taking away from this conversation, Ash, is that you think so deeply about the making of art. You've touched on the how, but also the why, and a little bit about the who when you're talking about the kids and the Frankentoys. Let's talk about the who.
Yeah.
So one thing that so Travis Bell, in Travis' interview, he spoke about yourself, and how, and he sees you as a mentor, a friend.
Yeah.
And you used to share a studio together,
We
I
did,
think.
yeah.
And then when I was talking to Katie Barron recently, and she said, "Oh, you're going to talk to Ash? Fantastic! If without Ash, I wouldn't be where I am."
Yeah.
So that's the thing. You have your own arts practice, which is continually evolving, and you're very clear on what that is. But you're also so invested in other people's practices. That's what I get.
Yeah, it's actually it's right up there as almost the most important thing. I can talk about art practice until the cows come home. Ange and I, we sit in this room, and it's a room where we talk about art, we talk about each other's practice, we throw around ideas, we do all those kinds of things, and we also talk about people that are influential to us, whether they're big name artists or whether they're people that are local. But for me, I think the most profound thing that happened to me when I moved here, so I've been here for about 15 years, was that I started to connect with people that had this, I don't know, this amazing electricity happening in them about how they made artwork and why they were making it. So that then, and it becomes a little bit of an addiction, because you know that they're out there and you want to find them. And my experience in the art scene in Melbourne as well as in Tassie is that not everyone has the ability to scream their name or to make their name heard. They need somebody to help them out. And I will do that over and above anything else for the rest of my days, because it's so worthwhile. It is so heart-wrenchingly beautiful to see people kind of like come out of the woodwork or to find them. I mean, you know, Katie Barron was somebody where I read somebody had shared an article with me about something that she'd done in Canada and that she'd moved here, and I just went, holy heck! And then just by sheer happenstance, she was having an exhibition of work at Sawtooth, and then Sawtooth is a really important part of a lot of these stories. I mean, I showed a lot of my artwork in the early days of Sawtooth, so I owe them and people like Zara a great debt.
Me too.
But then, you know, it's about being able to. It's not about kind of like lifting rocks up and looking at urchins. It's about people that are there and you can clearly see them. If they don't have a voice, it's not their fault, but they don't have somebody that is an advocate for them. The most important thing I can do is be that advocate, because I walked into Russell Street Studios. It was just last year. And I was talking to Sonia Bruff there, and I was looking around, and I saw one piece of work in there that was lamp work, glass, and I just went, holy heck, who's that? And Sonia gave me a phone number, and I called this lady, Helene, and she lives in Invermay, and she does all this amazing glass work, and she showed me what she's done and stuff, and I went, holy! There was no way I was going to find that lady.
No.
I had to be able so for me to be at places, to be at openings and to meet people and that kind of stuff. It's not about, and I'm not that gregarious. I just like the connection with people that are in the arts, that are, whether it's kind of going to see. I mean, at the moment, you know, at Madeline Gordon's gallery, there's works by Nolan and Whiteley. You go to the design centre and you actually see furniture that's made. The stuff that's in there at the moment from Vicky West and her daughter, holy moly!
I haven't seen it.
Oh my God! It's just so beautiful. I mean, I get that frisson just talking about it. It's just amazing, amazing work. So those things are things that I will. If there was a moment where I wasn't going to be surprised by finding somebody who made great art or be experiencing great art, I just think that you just take me out to the back paddock with and just I don't want to come back. But so because Katie Barron was somebody where I just went, this, you don't meet the real deal all the time, and she really is.
Yeah.
She's that person. She works hard. She's talented. She has good ideas. She has amazing ideas. So yeah, and Travis Bell. I mean, the work that I was showing you before of Travis's, or these are Travis's as well. I saw them sitting on like a low shelf in a critique one day, and I just went, I have to have those. I've never seen anything quite like it. And I think, and seeing him now in educational space, I feel so proud.
Yeah.
And that pride is something as well, that it's like, okay, it's not about me being the person that has actually gotten them there. I'm just glad that somebody was able to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes you can't be that person at that time. Somebody else has found that person, and I'm just as chuffed because it's like, holy heck, where's this person come from? Because the whole thing about looking at what an artist can do is based on on how they've kind of travelled to a point where art is still a challenge for them, and they're not talking about art like it's something that is like, oh well, I'm into it now and I'm doing it. I don't really care, you know.
Well, one thing I was thinking about recently, actually, in that regard, is what is success? I mean, we all ask this question: what is success? But there's a complacency when if the ego takes over and you think you've made it. But the idea of the struggling artist is a myth. It's perpetuated by the power structures in place. But
absolutely,
the thing is what that can lure us into is thinking, okay, I've made it now. I've sold a few paintings, or I've there are people writing about my work. That for me is a huge problem. I'm not saying that many people do, but there is a danger that can come. And so I said this in the interview with Maggie Jeffries. I always consider myself. I never like to think of myself as an expert on anything. I love to learn, but it's this thing of, no, I'm not the expert, and I'm always emerging. So Maggie describes herself as an emerging artist. She's gaining there's so much success.
She's so talented.
But I suppose what you're saying there about how, helping people to, you just like, I'm a cheerleader. That's my role in life. I could be the coach in certain spheres, but really, actually, what I'm really good at is being the cheerleader. And so, but what I'm not really good at is getting out there like you do and going to and discovering people's work. So when you discover someone's work, what happens? How does not just for you and how you feel about it, but do you then go and have a conversation with them and do you get to know them? Or?
I try to, because the thing that I think is very, very important to not be blasé about and to be respectful of is the studio.
Yes.
So, and this is my own philosophy, and I just take that into my interactions with artists. Is that the studio is the inner sanctum of creativity, and you were invited in. It's almost a vampire thing. You can't get in unless you're invited. So I meet lots of artists, kind of like more casually for coffee and those kinds of things, and then I allow them to say, do you want to have a look at some work? Come to my studio. And then from there, and this is about me gaining kind of places and ways that you can actually help artists, because sometimes it's not about saying, well, I'll curate a show of your work, or I'm going to put you in contact with a commercial gallery. It might actually be that I can help them with a grant application.
Yeah.
I can help them get in touch with somebody that is actually doing a residency, so that my own knowledge can then just be imparted to them as tips and hints that they can take away, that can help them depending on where they are. Because some artists that they've come back to art practice after many years. I know it's sometimes common for female artists to come back to our practice after having children and those kinds of things. And it's to be able to go, okay, I don't know that I know the lay of the land like I used to. It's like, that's totally fine. I didn't know the lay of the land of Tasmania at all when I first moved here.
No.
And I started to get to know people through I'm working at Handmark, because that was one of my early jobs.
Okay.
So so the people that I met there were Alice Bradbury. She was the one that was managing it, and the other person that she'd hired early on was Patrick Sitzak. So that was where I first started to kind of go, okay, how do I start to develop ways of helping people?
Yes.
Because I wasn't really doing my own practice at that time. I was pretty much wanting to get myself involved in the community, and I did that through association, through people, and then through the university primarily. And then outside of that, doing things in different frames where I could say, you know what, I don't really need to be, there's nothing that I need to be looking at for grant funding at the moment, but there's people that are looking for grant funding, or somebody's looking at a job in the arts and they've never applied for a job like that, and they want some tips. Or can I be a reference often for people's applications to jobs, perhaps those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that it's not just about saying, you know what, I'm going to be the person that's going to make you a star. That's not me.
No.
No, that's not me, because I think one of what you were just hitting on before is this disparity between between the power, the money, and the ego of the arts and the artist, and they're very much wanting to be somebody more than they can, but it's the people that actually have that power that feel like they can make or break.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you're just using your hands there to sort of gesture up and down. The metaphor of success. Success as being you're on an upward trajectory. But I've never met an artist who would say that they want to be somewhere like. And they are very much grounded in their studio practice. But the way the arts works globally is, and the way the arts interact with, we talked about capitalism and consumerism before, but we just end up subscribing to this. Well, we've got to keep going somewhere. It's like I was talking with a group of artists recently about Instagram. Feeling like we've got to keep posting something on Instagram just so people know we're still working. That's a really interesting phenomenon for me. But I think if we can get back to, what's really, really important here is how you're so deeply embedded in this community here in the arts in Tasmania, and that sense of community that I've only been here 4 years, and you said about discovering Travis's work, for example. My first experience, I guess, of connecting with people in the arts here was at the university. Someone a friend had said to me, "Oh, there's a dark." No one had a photographic practice. There's a dark room at the university. This is the person you need to talk to. Troy Ruffles. And went in, met Troy, and then Troy gave me a tour of the art school, and this was sort of like just after lockdown, and there's Travis in the studio and just sitting at the wheel, and I was just seeing this work being made. It just blew me away, right?
Yeah.
But as there's all these nooks and crannies, all these corners of the arts here in Tasmania, and then there's this, I get this strong sense of community, and there are there's yourself and so many people who are just wanting to help in whatever way you can to lift people up. If you could, do you get that sense of community, and if so, what is it?
I do, very much. And I don't know, it's kind of cliche to say that kind of like in regional spaces and kind of spaces that are smaller, you've got a lesser population, but there's there could be artists that connected more easily. But that really sounds boring to say.
Yeah.
It's more kind of like about some romantic lightning that can happen between places where people gather, where I can I'm just kind of like I feel like I've just been hugged to death whenever I go some places, you know. And it was like there was it was the last time I was at Sawtooth, and it was just that it was Bonnie who had her work there, and I'd taught her, and then there was a few other people that were about, and it was really quite interesting to kind of like to have a situation where you knew so many people, you know.
Yeah. I suppose that's it. There's a yeah. You've taught, so people know each other from various contexts in and around the arts, but then having spaces as well is really important.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. So, I mean, Travis and I, we shared a space, and there was about 3 other of us that were in that space. I got to the stage where it was affordable, I suppose, in the scheme of things, but I decided that it was probably best to come. So I've come back to a studio here at home,
okay,
where it's actually really quite small, and I've returned to sitting in front of the sewing machine and just having a ball, and doing small scale stuff.
Yep.
And every now and again I'll do some commission casting for somebody to make a bit more money, because people know what that was a skill set that I kind of developed, and because it's more organic, 3-dimensional than doing 3D printing, where you can get all the detail and stuff that you want to out of stuff. But no, the community here is something that is. I don't know. It's almost like kind of like going to the airport, and knowing that you're always going to see somebody that you know. When I'm at different places, I'll always bump into somebody that I know, and they could be maybe kind of like not related to the arts, but related to somebody else. They might be the mother of somebody that I taught, and I got to know that person, or they're a friend of somebody else that that works in an area that I've worked. Because going down the streets of Launceston and being able to walk into a shop, like I go into Petrux all the time, and I know half the people behind the counter just because I buy books, not because I'm, you just get to know these people. So I think in a close-knit community, it's kind of impossible. Well, no, it is possible to not be engaged. And I do see some people in the arts not engage, and it's like you're missing out.
Yeah.
Completely missing out on getting to know all these pieces. And if you care about this community, you should be connecting with them. Whereas for me, I'm not kind of. My motivation isn't about. I am the fleshy vessel that needs to be out there, but it doesn't mean anything to me in my own realm of popularity.
No.
It's about being able to to add some popularity to the people that, like I said before, that don't actually have that voice.
One of the things that came up in that conversation the other day about Instagram with some artists was about, we go on to Instagram to get those insights into, see into people's studios and their practices and so on. But actually, the algorithm isn't actually, it's actually sort of blocking that now to somehow. You're not getting what you're looking for there. But I do think that's something is by understanding other people's practices and just being out there in the arts world and just having conversations it can be affirming. It can be, I make little zines. I did the Hobart Zine Fair at the weekend.
Oh, zines are great. I love zines.
I arrived. I had a little bit of trepidation about it. I don't know why, but just by the end of the day, I had so many great conversations, and I learned a lot from the people around me. I took so much away from it, had so many great conversations, and I've come away inspired to do more work. And I suppose that's what's going to happen.
That's it. I mean, it's being inspired to make more work. Because that's happened to me recently, where I've actually, and a lot of it is actually kind of like getting into the archive of all your old stuff. So I I got a new motorcycle recently, and I needed to make a bit more space in the garage. And I just went through some boxes and stuff, and I found my PhD work. I've got a few pieces out here I'll show you. And I found a few other bits and pieces, and I found some of my textile work, and I went, okay, some unfinished stuff. And I went, okay. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going back into doing some textile art, and that's kind of given me inspiration to look at those, but to look at doing that work and finishing it off. But then I reconnected with some folks that I worked with at UTAS, and got back into thinking about doing more photography. And at the same time, a friend of ours has just kind of like started up a dark room at the bottom of his house, Anthony.
I saw on Instagram. There you go. I was just bagging Instagram. There you go. Yeah, and I've met Anthony.
So Anthony Crawford, you build this. And we all pitched in. I sewed the curtains, and some other friends kind of like did painting and stuff in there. And Ange and I had lots of black and white processing things, trays and tongs and all those kinds of things to give him. And he said, "Oh, you guys can come over and do some stuff." And I went over there just this weekend gone. And I had these negatives that I took when I was 29 and I was in Italy.
Yeah.
And I took all these photographs of all of the sculptures and everything in Florence, but I'd never had them printed. So I did a contact print, and then I printed one image, and I just went, oh my God, I can remember. It just brought this thing back to me. And so what it did is it brought me back all the way back to me being a teenager, wanting to be a black and white, being a photographer, and going to the and applying to RMIT and not getting in and stuff, and taking full circle back to that. And now I put a new battery in my old K1000 Pentax, and I've got film in it. I'm taking photographs this weekend. So I think it's important for me and for other people to be able to feel like they're inspired to keep on making art, because it can be every now and again you can get knocked back a little bit. And a lot of people they're putting their work into art prizes, and they're doing all these things where they're putting a lot of their faith into this idea that people will understand what their art is, and they will get it to a point where it can be part of an art prize, it can be part of an exhibition. So all I care about is that I can I've got the ability for the rest of my life. The great thing about being in the arts is something that Tony Curran said in your podcast that I loved was that if you're an athlete or you're those kinds of sports people, you get to a point where you have to kind of like pack it in. As you're an artist, as you get older, you get better, and that's the truth. I know that I look at Katie Barron's paintings as an example in the next 20 years, and I'm just going to be going, oh my God, she's just still making great stuff. Travis Bell's work, I saw some of his work recently. Wow. Wow. I just thought he's done everything. He can't do anything better than that, and he has. And as well here, Angela, I live with somebody who is an amazing artist. Absolutely. She's got the right creative brain to mix with a crazy guy like me. And so I'm privileged to just have art around me all the time. That's it. All the stacks of books and everything in here, it's all about art practice.
Yes, yeah.
If it's not about, toys and comics and stuff. But.
And that, Ash, I think you were talking about coming back into your own studio practice. You were getting really excited about all these different things that you're working on. And it is that. It's it's how you go out into the world. You're part of the arts, and then you bring that back into your studio as well. And that's a beautiful thing. I love these red hot tips, and that for me is a red hot tip. Is if you're in your studio and you're feeling stuck, get out there perhaps, and then have a great conversation, and that might inspire you to come back.
You bring it back. Yeah, bring it back. It's and for me, I've actually now made an active choice in that space for holding on to in bookshelves and stuff, exhibition catalogues and those kinds of things. It's not about art itself. It's about art that people have made, so that I can actually go, these people did it, and I shouldn't complain about not doing it. That these people have done these things, and I'm going to keep their catalogues to remind me that they did it, and they made these. They got a grant, they had an exhibition, they did a residency, they made artwork, they got looked after by a commercial gallery, and they had a group show. All of those things things that I try to remind myself, so I don't become complacent, because it's very, very easy to say, oh, you know, I know the art world and everything. It's like, no, I don't.
No.
No, I don't. It's a continual algorithm that no one is going to work out. And that's the reason why I love it, is because nothing is going to stop it from being something that is just universally beautiful and known and also unknown.
Yes, yeah. Great place to end it there, Ash. Look, there's one thing that I always ask every guest is how people can reach out to you. But I am very fearful that because you are so generous and you are such a great advocate, that you are going to be bombarded with people reaching out to you. But yeah, look, how can people contact you?
People can reach out to me. My personal email address is the best one, and it's just textilebird, one word, @gmail.
Okay.
That's a great way to get in contact with me. Yeah, they can probably get in contact with me through you. But I mean, but if people do see me at galleries and openings and those kinds of things, and they do have questions about the arts or questions about their practice or any of those kinds of things, you've got me at hello, really.
Yeah.
Because I'm the happiest guy if I can actually still be looking at art, making art, meeting artists. There's those three simple things.
Look, I will testify to that. I think the last time I saw you without us speaking was Madeline Gordon's gallery, Anna van Stralen's opening, and you were beaming.
Yeah.
I love Anna's work. Everybody loves Anna's work, but you were absolutely beaming, and I just think that just exemplifies why everyone should.
Well, the thing is like I've known Anna's work for a while.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I was saying before about you think you know something, you don't.
No.
And you don't, and you just don't know what an artist is going to do, and you can't pigeonhole artists. I hate it when people go, oh, well, that artist is like that artist. It's like, no, that artist, has a similar style or a similar aesthetic or whatever, but that's their own work. Don't do that. Don't say that. So when I go into a gallery like I did on that occasion, and because Anna's such an amazing artist, and saw her go through her own PhD process at a similar time to me doing. So I had a position to be able to look at what she was making as she was doing it. But then I saw that body of work at the back of the gallery, and it just made me so, I was going to swear, happy.
Yeah.
Because it confirmed what I need. This confirmation.
Okay.
And this confirmation is that everything's okay in the art world. And those things in the art world that are okay are when an artist is just going above and beyond, and they always do. I shouldn't worry. But I always worry about the plight of an artist. What are the things that are knocking them back, that are affecting their practice? I worry about those things. I worry about that with my own practice. Yeah. Because I have had my own little challenges over the past year that have really hit my creativity. Okay. So it's really important to be able to go into a gallery and look at Anna's work and go, oh, fantastic, look at this. She's still hitting it through the post, and it's amazing.
That's it. You don't have all the answers.
No.
I don't have all the answers. None of us have all the answers, and that's why we need we need this sense of community.
Bloody oath.
God. Ash, thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for popping by.
We should do it again sometime.
Bloody oath.
Thanks a lot.
No worries. See you later.